Starting from the centre front, fold the fabric matching the notches to create the pleats. There's 3 on each centre front panel. Make the bulk of the seam face towards the side seam on the hip so that you don't get any bulges across your stomach when you're wearing them. Using a straight stitch, lock stitch 5mm from the edge of the clots, making sure that you keep your pleats nice and flat. It's just to hold the pleats in place when you add the waistband, that there's not going to be any problems there. Lay the 2 front panels right sides facing and match up the crotch seam. Make sure that if you're inexperienced you put pins along just to keep the seam nice and together in place. You don't want any bunching at this point, otherwise it won't sit very nicely once it's on the body. Use the lock stitch again to make a 1cm seam allowance. Straight down the full length of the seam, making sure to put finishing stitches at the beginning and at the end just to hold the seam. I've then overlocked the crotch seam and the back waist just to keep the edges of the fabric obviously nice and clean and stop any fraying. This can be done either with a zigzag or a finishing stitch on your domestic machine. The next step is to attach the front waistband to the front of the clots. So you need to fold that in half, and there'll be a notch on the side of the pattern, and then match that with right sides facing from one hip seam to the other hip seam, and then also the centre front, there'll be a centre front notch on the waistband pattern. The waistband is then sewn on with a straight stitch at 1cm seam allowance. The seam allowances are kept even throughout the garment making process. The next step is to join the side seams. So just pin down the length if you need to, or if you're more comfortable you can always tack it to make sure the fabric doesn't move. After you've sewn the side seams, the next step is to match up the crotch seams. Make sure that you get the front and the back together, right sides facing again, and then you just machine exactly the same as you have done on all the other seams. After you finish the inside leg crotch seam, you can now overlock or use a finishing stitch on the side seams, the inside leg and the hem, just to give your garment a nice clean finish. The back waistband is included on the back panels. Fold the back waist section over the front waistband, place the elastic on the back panel side and lock stitch using 1 cm seam allowance as before. Make sure to be careful that you match the seams. Then need to pull the back waistband over the elastic just to cover it up. To put the elastic on neatly and make sure you don't catch it, you're best to change the machine foot to a zipper foot. It will help the foot to run alongside the elastic and not get any stitches on the elastic and allow the waistband to ruche properly. To sew the waistband, place the zipper foot against the elastic, making sure that you don't get any stitches on the elastic itself. Making sure to get it even as well. If you match the centre back seams and then pull the elastic as you go to give the tension that you need. The last stage is just to hem the legs, so making sure that you use a 1 cm turn up all the way around. Just stitch along the entire seam and use finishing stitches at the beginning and the end to hold them in place. And voila! There's your finished culottes, and all you need to do now is press them so that they're ready to wear.